So yeah, we're going to get started real quick. And I think most of you have been on these before. So just know that George will be doing a lot of talking, but he'll stop periodically to catch you up and see if you have any questions. And as always, if you have questions, put them in the chat. And if you don't want to wait, and I'll get it to George. And also, I would just, if you can, if your device allows, I would keep the chat open, because a lot of times people put interesting things in the chat and we all learn from each other. So now I will turn it over to George.
Okay. Well, this is something that we've wanted to do for a while, and it's kind of more of a grab bag of things, but stepping out of an individual issue or some of the more intense stop, drop, and roll sessions we've done, and just kind of catch up on some other things that have been going on, and from a framing perspective. And so I'd like to start to talk about that at this point we have an advantage. The Democrats have an advantage, one we really haven't had for a while. I mean, we can talk about, yes, we have the presidency and technically both houses of Congress, but you know, we know the Congress part isn't necessarily true at this point. But right now, on many issues, you go back and forth on them, and I find 75% plus or minus agree with us on lots of issues. Biden's approval rating is now 66%. Trump was at 29% when he left. I mean, that's a low bar to jump over, but 66 is pretty good. Biden's been really good on the American Rescue Plan and on his infrastructure bill, communicating what those things are. Most people are with us on common sense gun laws. Most people, including a number of the populist Republicans, are with us on having the rich pay their fair share. It's interesting that the Republicans have moved more populist, and in doing so are less enamored with the guys at the top. And I think that's a very interesting development to watch and see where that goes. And right now, they're kind of with us on that. Recent Gallup poll says that Democrats normally have a 4 to 6 point advantage over Republicans. Our advantage is now, according to the Gallup poll, 9%. At the very least, it's grown. And there's been a 6% increase in people calling themselves independents. My guess is that 6% are disaffected Republicans, but what do I know? But that's the thought. So, I mean, those things are really good. That is a real advantage for us. I think right now we have an opportunity to build on what's been going on with Biden and his miraculous communications team. I mean, look at the names of these bills. The American Rescue Plan, great framing on that. The American Family Plan, another good one. He's been really good about divorcing voters from Republicans. And what I mean is he's basically, when he talks about bipartisanship, he means between Democrats and the American people, between his ideas and the American people, and that it cuts across parties. This is something new that seems to be hitting. And so obviously our job is to be on top of that and do that. And also his communication team, absolutely amazing. This is the best communications team I've seen yet. Kate Bedingfeld, who runs the show, is amazing. And Jen Psaki is my new must-see TV. She's like the best, you know, she's the best White House spokesman I have ever seen. And she does it with grace and aplomb, to coin a phrase.
And a little bit of snark.
And a tad bit of snark. She's right on target with that. So these are all good. So I think one suggestion I'd make is follow the lead of the Biden team. Listen to what their messaging is and repeat the things that they're saying. So far, they've been great. I can only assume someone there understands framing because they've been pretty good at it so far. So repeat those messages and make sure that we're saying this to people. And I'll have some examples tonight of some of those. In fact, let's do the first one here. I'm going to get this up on the screen. And I'll preface this by saying, in the morning when Lisa and I are having our coffee.
Yeah, Congressman, there was quite a bit of commentary.
Sorry, someone was talking to me as my video started. In the morning when we're having our morning coffee, we watch Morning Joe. It's on MSNBC. And I watch it for one reason, mainly that it's the only place that I see on TV where on a daily basis, there are solid Democrats and lots of the high profile disaffected Republicans, the old style Republicans. John Meacham still calls himself a Republican, but he is, you'll sit there and see John Meacham and various other former generals and folks who just are going, Joe Biden's the guy, Democrats have the plan, they're doing everything right, this is where we have to be, and maybe someday our party will come back together. But it's very interesting. And so I'll preface this video, which is going to be about 6 minutes. Hate to do that to you, but I think it's a good one. And I'll preface it by saying Scarborough has come around on this. I mean, he seemed to be somewhat okay with all of the crazy stuff when he was in Congress, but he's come around quite a bit, probably due to his wife, Mika Brzezinski, the daughter of Zbigniew Brzezinski. And but he's with us, although in this video, he's going to challenge Sean Patrick Maloney, the D-Trip chair. And it looks like Liz might have seen this. So I'm going to share my screen and start this. And here we are. For those who just joined, we're going to show a video. Okay.
Yeah, Congressman, there was quite a bit of commentary after the 2020 election that and analysis on the voting that one reason why Democrats underperformed in the House races especially is because Republican messages of defunding the police, cancel culture, socialism actually did have an impact, not just on white working class Americans, but also across the board. I'm wondering how the messaging is going on counteracting those three attacks, which you're going to face again in 2022, and how would you counteract the attack against radical Democrats packing the court, which I'm sure is the next attack that's going to be coming from Republicans?
Well, I think I just addressed the court issue, but with respect to Republican lies and demagoguery on an issue as important as racial justice, well, I hope we'll all just spend a moment and look at the trial that's going on in Minnesota. Look at the latest killing of Duarte Wright. Look at what's happening in Chicago. So here's what I've told my team. We're going to fight for racial justice because our colleague John Lewis got his head bashed in marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And if somebody had said to him, boy, you got hurt, you shouldn't fight for that, well, we know what his answer would have been. So if we have to be smart about it, and we've got to communicate better because we know the other side has no compunction about taking an issue as important as racial justice in this country and trying to gain cheap political points by demagoguing it, by whipping up white resentment, or by making common cause worse with these white supremacist groups, by making a priority racist voting laws in Georgia. I mean, that's the choice. So we're going to fight for what's right, and we're going to do it in a way that's smart. And we're going to win these races because it's the moral imperative that we govern this country in a way that moves us forward and that doesn't take us back to the Jim Crow era.
So what's the response to the attack?
Here's the response.
After everything you've said, a Republican comes back and says Democrats wanted to defund the police. What do you say to that?
What I say is we're fighting for racial justice. What are you fighting for? Because if you're fighting for racist voting laws in Georgia, I'll have that conversation because we just kicked their butt all over Georgia in the last election. So with all due respect, when we talk about how the election went, we won the White House, we won the Senate, we held the House in a very difficult cycle. So I'd rather be us than them. And if anybody's doing an autopsy, it ought to be them because they got their butt kicked in November. That's why they're deep in the minority right now. And we're passing infrastructure bills and pandemic bills and delivering for the American people because ultimately their path is a dead end. And it needs to be,
You're-
because the way is up. It is not back down into the ugliest racism and Jim Crow era laws that we've seen throughout our nation's history. So my argument is, what are you doing about racial justice? And what do you say to the family of George Floyd? And what do you say to the millions of Americans who are crying out for a better country? You know, there's anguish for a reason. And our party is going to do something about it. We've passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What the hell is the Republican Party doing? So no, we're not going to run away from fighting for racial justice. Let's have that fight.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting you should.
Here we
So
go.
a couple of quick things, and forgive me for repeating the same question, but maybe I need to say it a different way. Do Democrats support defunding the police, first of all? And secondly, the Cook Political Report said that Democrats lost 25 of 25 contested House races in 2020. And I think most analysis believe that, at least in the House races, Democrats badly underperformed expectations. So address those two. And again, if you could specifically answer the question, again, it's not the question that I'm asking, it's a question that Republicans will continue to ask. Do Democrats support defunding the police?
Right. The answer is no. And you are asking the question, and you're repeating a Republican talking point for reasons I don't know. Excuse me.
Let me tell you why.
I'm trying to answer your question, Joe.
Excuse me. I'll tell you why I'm repeating it, because you all did such a damn poor job of answering that, such a poor job of answering socialism questions, such a poor job about answering cancel culture questions. That's why I'm repeating it, because if you believe that Kevin McCarthy should be Speaker of the House, keep pretending that none of that happened and keep saying that the House did a good job in 2020, because they did not. House Democrats did a poor job. So my question is, are you going into 2022 with eyes wide open?
Right. So as my friend Maxine Waters said to Jim Jordan, you're ranting again. But here's, if you'll allow me to answer your question.
If you don't
can I answer the question? Can I answer the question?
If you don't really care whether Democrats win or not in 2022, okay, let our viewers know that.
Sorry, hold on a second. I want you to look in the lower left-hand corner here. Play this little part over. Watch the lower hand left, or I'm sorry, Joe Scarborough's right elbow, right above the word rep.
Answer your question.
If you don't
can I answer the question? Can I answer the question?
If you don't really care whether Democrats win or not in 2022, okay,
Mika's trying to get him.
Let our viewers know that.
Yeah, that's what I said. How about you let me answer the question? The answer to the question is Kevin McCarthy is the minority leader, and we hold the gavels, Joe. And we just passed a $2 trillion rescue plan for the American people. We're about to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in American infrastructure. That's what winning looks like. And can we learn from 2020? You bet. You didn't hear me say everything went well. What I told you is I'm not going to run the other way, because on shows like this, you insist on repeating these Republican talking points when you know it's a lie that we want to defund the police. Look at the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. By the way, the American Rescue Plan contains huge resources for our frontline responders and our police. So we are literally the party funding the police. And if your point is that we need to communicate better, well, fair enough. But do me a favor. Please also acknowledge that when you echo and amplify these talking points of the Republican Party, you give them life. So that's what I'm trying to remind you of, is that why don't you look at what we passed and be fair about that?
I don't need that reminder. I have spent the last 5 years saying every day on this show that Republicans are lying, that they're lying about Democratic positions. I ask members that come on about defunding the police. I did it in real time. I ask leaders of the Democratic Party if Republicans are lying about them. I'm simply asking, are Democrats going to be prepared in 2022 to answer these lies? I'm not repeating lies. I'm not amplifying lies. I'm calling them lies. And I'm curious, as are a lot of Democrats and a lot of Democratic activists and a lot of Democratic donors, if Democrats are going to be able to stop Kevin McCarthy from being the next Speaker of the House.
The answer is yes. And the reason is because they are wrapped around the axle, and we have been out and aggressive, defining them as a party playing footsie with QAnon conspiracy theorists, justifying Matt Gaetz' misconduct, defending members like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are confused about whether the plane hit the Pentagon. Look at the media campaign we launched, the most expensive, most aggressive, earliest effort that has ever been done. So with all due respect, if I don't want to get on their side of the chessboard and talk about what they say, but I want to go out and talk about the American Rescue Plan, which is supporting local communities, supporting our schools, safely reopening them, bringing life back to our economy together with the infrastructure investments we're going to make. That's why we're going to win this election, because we are responsible adults delivering good government, good health, and good economic growth. And they are a party wrapped around the axle of some very dangerous and irresponsible elements. That's why we're going to win. But I am not going to stand here and kick around some stupid Republican lie about our fight for racial justice as though it's worth talking about. And that's my point to you.
Yeah, well, and my point to you is that Donald Trump and Republicans said a lot of those offensive, racist lies over the past 4.5 years. And unfortunately, they did much better talking about those lies in swing districts in 2020. I hope you understand.
And they did so well in November. They did so well in November that Donald Trump's down at Mar-a-Lago. And the Senate is in Democratic hands, and we're running the House. So all due respect, like, there's winning in politics and there's everything else.
Well, with all due respect, if Democrats don't do better in 2022 than they did in 2020, then my point is Kevin McCarthy will be Speaker of the House. Jim Jordan will be a chairman of committees. And I think that's something that a lot of Americans think is dangerous. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Let's bring in Barbara. All
right. All right. So you see what kind of went on there. What's interesting is that Scarborough's charge is that the Democrats aren't doing messaging well. And what he's seeing happening right in front of him is exactly what you should do. Sean Patrick Maloney didn't take the bait. He wasn't going to talk about defund the police. He wasn't going to talk about democratic socialism. He named exactly what it was that shouldn't happen. He said we should not repeat Republican talking points. Now, technically, these were not necessarily, they weren't Republican, they were Republican talking points, unfortunately, only after folks on our side used those terms, but they were organic terms. At least defund the police happened in with protesters in the height of a very emotional and intense protest. So anyway, I thought it was just hilarious because here's the, Joe says your messaging isn't good, and Sean Patrick Maloney is doing everything he can to do everything right, and he does it. And Scarborough doesn't get it. And I'm not saying Scarborough's an idiot. He's not. It's just that it's amazing that in this day and age, especially after there's been so much talk about messaging, there's been a lot of talk about framing. Don't Think of an Elephant came out in 2004, which started this framing thing. And still it hasn't filtered up to some of the people who are on television every day. So that's a good example of how to do it, because you saw Maloney, pivot every single time. He just pivots. He goes, well, yeah, but I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about what really matters. And then he does it, and he pivoted it every time. Just amazing. So I thought that was a great video. And I thought I'd follow it with another one, which is shorter, but is pretty cool. And let me pop this one up and pause it. Let me get it full screen for you.
I like don't get on their side of the chessboard too. I heard that too. I thought that was a good term.
Okay, those Star Trek fans will know who this is on the right. Geordie LaForge. He's great. And but LeVar Burton also did Reading Rainbow for years. He's been a big advocate for kids' books. So he's being asked about the Dr. Seuss thing. So listen to how he handles this. He's just such an elegant speaker.
And host Jeopardy, but we have talked on the show about the decision by the Dr. Seuss estate to discontinue 6 of his books that feature racist imagery. What do you think of that decision and about the cancel culture surrounding works of art or artists that are controversial?
You know, it's interesting because I just for the Seuss Foundation did a voice over for a video that they have put together to remind us that Dr. Seuss is more than simply a company that's decided to put a couple of books on the shelf to take them out of rotation. That man, Theodore Geisel, is responsible for generations of wholesome, healthy, wonderful, imaginative, creative content for children of all ages. And so I think we need to put things in perspective. In terms of cancel culture, I think it's misnamed. That's a misnomer. I think we have a consequence culture, and that consequences are finally encompassing everybody in the society, whereas they haven't been ever in this country. So I think that there are good signs that are happening in the culture right now. And I think it has everything to do with a new awareness on people who were simply unaware of the real nature of life in this country for people who have been othered since this nation began.
So sorry about for some reason, I have my phone disconnected and it's still ringing through my computer. It's got to be the NSA. I don't know. It's somebody. But how, I just love the way that LeVar Burton handled that. Cancel culture. He wasn't having it. He said, no, you could talk about a consequence culture, which I thought was great. And then he also, instead of this, the frame on the right and from Meghan McCain is this cancel culture. Supposedly you're telling me I can't say things. And he just wasn't having it. He said, hey, if they decide to take some of these things off the shelf, that's okay. Dr. Seuss is still a great guy. The stories are great. He's done tremendous for people's reading. He's getting back into what the real issue is. And then he says consequence culture, which I like, he's and so he's reframed it. And the thing about LeVar Burton is he's very calm. He's very self-assured. He's honest in what he says and authentic. And he was gentle with someone who probably, who was coming at him in a different way. He's very, very, very elegant speaker and a thoughtful speaker. So I just thought that was nice, especially after we watched Joe Scarborough kind of go off the rails and things were a little wacky there. LeVar Burton kind of just brings it back to reality. So I thought those were two videos. Any questions or comments on those videos?
I do. I wanted to comment on that. So the second video that we watched, if I had to be really fussy about it, I would say, don't repeat again the cancel culture. Like for him to go watch it and just say, well, I think what our culture is, and then go on, you know what I mean? Not say, just do not fall into the trap of repeating their words. And he did an awesome job. I agree. And then the first video that we watched, I got lost in the congressman's whole spiel. He was talking too much. And I know he was trying to get his message in, and he just had too many words, and I think he did a really good job. But like, if I were watching that with him and going through it with him, I would say, look, you've got to trim this out. You have to trim that out. This is where you should have stopped talking. You need to hit your point and let an open space lay for people to think about what you just said. Because he said some really strong, good things.
That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought, yeah, and that guy, he just kept saying those same frames over and over. And I love how he called him out, but he needed to be a little more forceful and really make that part of his message and drop kind of the rest of it and focus more maybe on, we're just going to talk about what you're doing. You know what I mean? Instead of all the rest of the rescue, you know what I mean? And just really flip his message and hone in on it.
Well, I think it's important that he pivoted, but I absolutely agree with you. Fewer, make one point at a time and leave people the room, like you say, to let it sink in. There's a concept in sales that when you've sold the customer something and they've said, okay, I'll take it, then you don't keep selling the product. It's called buying the product back. Because what can end up happening is you keep talking about it and they go, well, maybe I do need to think more about this. And so then they walk out and go buy it someplace else. So yeah, I agree. I think that's good news or the good way to look at it. Any other comments? Okay, continuing on with our grab bag, we're going to go to Rotarians. So, and Lisa is a Rotarian.
Yes, I am.
She
Are there
is.
any other Rotarians here? Or has anybody ever been a Rotarian? Hobie?
I don't know what a Rotarian is.
Okay, Rotary it's like an international organization, and it's like typically it's like people in businesses or in school districts or whatever can join a local Rotary club. So it's an international organization, but it's locally based. And I happen to be a member of the St. Louis Park Sunrise Rotary Club. I joined when I was the community ed director in St. Louis Park Public Schools, and I stayed on even after I retired because I enjoy the club. So, anyway, George will talk. We'll talk a little bit about the four-way test here in a second. So,
And contrary to popular belief, I was shocked when I went to one of the meetings and noticed that no one was rotating at all. Everyone was perfectly still in their chairs. I don't get it. It sounds to me like a fun thing to do, but apparently not. But they don't miss much else. So there's the four-way test. And I thank Rep. Dean Phillips for popping this up. He picked up on this and wrote an email, and it struck me about the Rotarians four-way test, which reads as follows. Number one, is it the truth? Number two, is it fair to all concerned? Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? And four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And I looked at that and I said, well, now that's cooking with values. That's an organization that's got a really interesting and very value centric four-way test, they call it. And I'm not sure if the Rotarians are quite aware of it, but they get pretty close to describing a good chunk of the core liberal values.
and the interesting thing is Rotary is a nonpartisan organization, although it is definitely made up of Republicans and Democrats, and well, in this country, and of course it's an international organization, so political stripes from across the world, but it's not a partisan organization, but everybody comes together in the Rotary, and it's all about service to your community and service to the world, and that
Okay.
that's where the value part comes in.
So, but isn't it interesting that just the four ways of their tests there really is a lot about what liberals do? I mean, we're certainly the only party living in the world of reality and truth nowadays. We're very interested in fairness, goodwill, and better friendships. You know, we're all in this together. And will it be beneficial to all concerned? These, you know, and it's interesting to find, or actually put it this way, it's an interesting example of where people who may be Republicans in Rotary believe these values when they're in Rotary, and when they're in the Republican Party in a political context, not so much. It was a way to kind of point out that idea that that using Lakoff's fancy term biconceptuals, basically everybody understands the values of the other side. Everybody knows what we all grew up in this culture, and we all apply pretty much all those values. We just don't always apply the same ones to politics. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing. Yeah, Liz.
What was the second one? I got the first, third, and fourth.
The second one was, in fact, here, you know what I should do here?
Why don't you pop it up on the thing? Of course, I have it memorized because at every single Rotary meeting, we say it. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all
Here
concerned?
we go. I'm going to share my screen.
But he's going to share the screen so you can.
I put them in the chat.
Very good.
Oh, way to go. All right. Karen, are you a Rotarian?
I Googled.
Oh, you're a good Googler. All right. Okay, well, if there aren't any comments on that, let's do some science just for fun. I think there is an awful lot going on in psychology, and that's basically what we're talking about with messaging and framing. It's the science.
Unshare that.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. There we go.
George, can I make a comment about the
please.
last section before we go on?
Yeah, Gary.
It's not that Republicans in the Rotary have one set of values while they're attending meetings and then go home and have another set of values. I mean, to some extent, yeah, we all do that, but we all think that our own sense of morality, and this is a Lakoff point if ever there was one, right?
Yep.
We all think that our own sense of morality is the right and good one, and we none of us. He specifically makes this point: none of us ever actually go out and try to harm somebody else or do bad things. We all even Adolf Hitler said that getting rid of the Jews was a right and good thing. You can completely disagree with that, and I'm sure we all do. But everybody thinks they're always doing good and right, and so you can have these two different strict father and nurturant parent kinds of morality, and yet be 180 degrees different while you're subscribing to this. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's what's going on. Yeah. Like I say, we all are aware of these. And for example, a core value on the conservative side is that if you work really, really hard, then you will be rewarded. Working hard is morally good. The reward you get is a reward for your moral goodness, or then becomes a measure of your moral goodness. Well, we also on the left like to get paid for what we do and like to get paid well if we do a good job and work hard. So we have that. We just emphasize different, when we're doing policy, we emphasize different values, but we do understand them. And you're right. All the people believe they have the key to good morality. We do hear that. So okay, in psychology, there's an awful lot going on, and one of the hottest areas in psychology right now is, oddly enough, behavioral economics, which and as far as I'm concerned, all economics is psychology. I think the economists have fooled themselves into thinking it's anything but psychology, because the market is the aggregate behavior of human beings, and I guess at sometimes computers now. But taking computerized trading out of it, it's with the decisions we make in terms of the stock market and in terms of what we buy and how we buy things. So there were a couple of guys, Daniel Kahneman and Alex Tversky, and these guys, in fact, I'll show you a picture of them. They're kind of cool guys. If anybody has read, what was the movie? Moneyball and The Big Short. Michael Lewis is an author. He wrote a book about these two guys. And if you know Michael Lewis's work, it's all very interesting. He finds people who are really outstanding in one way or another, rather unique. These two folks here made absolutely brilliant and totally significant strides in behavioral economics. They were the team that basically proved that the rational actor theory of economics was complete hogwash. People are anything but rational most of the time, and especially about money. For example, people will weigh loss twice as much as they weigh gain. And there are also biases and just a large number of different kind of things that are the quirks in the way humans think. There's heuristics and rules of thumb and priming and all sorts of other things that go on. And their book called Thinking Fast and Slow goes into that stuff. And the book's got hundreds of clever studies that show you this stuff. It's a really great read. You'll come away thinking human thinking can be so flawed that it's a wonder we can tie our shoes in the morning. But but it's been great stuff. And it has been actually Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for his work. And the only reason Alex Tversky didn't was apparently they don't give Nobel Prizes to people who aren't alive anymore. But it's amazing stuff. And you'll learn more about cutting edge psychology and thinking fast and slow than just about anything else. But the big takeaway of that book is a concept called System 1 and System 2 thinking. And what they mean by that is System 1 is thinking in the moment. It's not primarily conscious thought. It may not be conscious at all. And it's where the brain figures things out moment to moment, relying on what it already knows to interpret the world. You can see there's an evolutionary bit to this. You can't sit around and go, gee, is that really a grizzly bear, or is it a Bigfoot? Or, you don't have time for that stuff. Your body will instantly recoil from things that, and you're not putting conscious thought into it. But that carries over into our everyday thinking, because we would be hard pressed to be able to analyze everything consciously that we encounter during the day. So System 1 is slow thinking.
No, that's fast.
Or I'm sorry, it's fast thinking. System 2 is slow thinking, and that's the rational and deliberative brain. It's the part of the brain that takes the time to carefully analyze things and come up with reasoned decisions. It's an entirely conscious exercise, and it actually takes a huge amount of energy. It's very taxing on us to think rationally. In fact, the brain already uses 25% of the body's energy just in, or I guess already uses 25%. So think of System 1, the fast thinking, in a way like breathing. Breathing is kind of an autonomous activity. And so most of the breathing that we do is unconscious. It just happens. It keeps us going. We don't have to remember to breathe every second. It just happens. System 2 is conscious voluntary thinking. And though breathing is autonomous, you can, if you choose, take it over and consciously guide your own breathing. If you do breathing exercises or meditation, you will do that. Sometimes you'll just decide to take a deep breath because it's really nice outside and take in some spring air. So you can take it over, but most of the time it's automatic. I like to think of System 1 and System 2 that way. The more in the moment System 1 thinking just happens. It's happening now. It happens when you're walking around, happens every waking moment, probably when you're sleeping in some ways. And System 2 requires you to make a decision to stop the automatic thinking and say, well, I'm going to question what it is that I know. I'm going to think about what it is that's going on in the world. I'm going to analyze things and see what's going on. So what this means for our purposes is that all of us, including the voters, make most decisions and interpretations using an unconscious System 1 thinking most of the time. It's our default state. And this makes, this makes evolutionary sense. And, you need to be able to respond to danger without having to ask questions. You need to be, getting out of the way of whatever danger it is. But also consider what the brain is doing on its own when it encounters events in the world. It is normally consulting what it knows and gets there by traveling the most worn in path of what it knows. So the way the brain is structured from the time you're born till through your development into adulthood, your brain is being wired and rewired. And so that those pathways to important ideas are quick pathways for your brain to use. Now, that doesn't mean that you've consciously thought them into existence like that. It's possible to do that, but that's how it works. So when we're trying to talk to people and message with people, we have to understand that what's going on in their brains, a lot of it is hardwired in, and they're going to take what you're saying and it's going to go through System 1 thinking first. It's going to not necessarily be a rational thing that's going on. So anyway, I thought I would mention that and see if anybody have any questions on that. A little bit of science.
Just so you know, I put we have a link, we have a bookshelf section in our on our website. So I put the link to that in the chat. And I actually would really recommend reading the book Thinking Fast and Slow. And one of the things that the author says that kind of stuck with me is that basically the brain is lazy. And it just wants to go to the quickest way to get to whatever it needs to get to. And so because the brain's lazy, system 2 doesn't like to kick in. And so that's why people don't think rationally, because it just takes, like George said, it takes more energy to do that. Also, think about system 1 and implicit bias and things like that. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot, like with the police and stuff like that. Implicit bias is really taking over the brain and making people think a certain thing about a person based on all their bias that comes up for them around a group of people. So let's just say Black men, and in the case of policing. And so that's system 1 thinking, implicit bias, really taking over there in the worst possible way.
And think about, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I do have a question. Oh,
Yeah, Karen.
sorry, puppies.
That's okay. We have 2 dogs here too. They're being quiet
Just
right now.
saying that,
So,
right? So I work for the Democratic Party and I live in a conservative area, and I oftentimes end up teaching people how to canvass and talk to voters. But when I do talk to voters, what is really hard is, let's say I'm tired, my children have misbehaved, the puppies are everywhere, my brain is not like 100% on, and these people are gonna spit out their talking points because they're so well trained, and we are not that well trained. We think and we're slow, and so that's when, but they are so discipline at spitting their talking points, and sometimes it's just hard. And what I'm looking for, what really would help, is a book with stuff like consequence culture to be used instead of cancel culture, like little cheat sheets with talking points that we can just kind of digest, and then once we are in the situation, my brain will remember and I will just spit them out. Are there books like that right now?
kind of. There, the kind of what you're talking about with a say this instead of that chart, in a way, the spreadsheet, or a replace and embrace is what it's called. They're out there, but I've noticed that, we've done some. We did one with Hobie a while back on the insurrection, and we've done some others, and other people have done them, but I haven't seen that collected in a book. What is in the book is that those charts are really good for learning, I think, and consulting when you need to. We've tried to push that it's important to know how to make that chart in the first place, to be thinking about, because if you can train your brain to be thinking along the lines of well, we call it stop, drop, and roll, but stop and think about what everybody's saying. See if you can figure out what frame is being used. The example we use in our workshop is immigration. The conservatives use a crime frame. So if we respond in that frame, we're bolstering that frame. We're keeping that frame alive. A refugee frame, for example, is a better frame for us, and we should stay out of that other one. So we think it's important to know how to do it. But we've done those, and those are, we have links to those. I think they may be on the website. If not, I will look and make sure that we get
And
those.
yeah,
to you.
we'll get that. I'll make a note and we'll get those out to you too. Some of those charts and things.
So George,
Most people are high level, like most people cannot just go do all the thinking. Most people just want a summary of things. And so
Right.
I approve, I agree, I should be thinking. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Albie.
I just wanted to maybe connect to Karen's point here. It is a general affliction of progressives and liberals to think with the forebrain and want to prove, based on our 17 talking points, that we're right. And I'm reminded of, you used a sales analogy. So there's an old sales analogy. What is planning a sales call? And the idea is you're going up in an elevator to meet your client. And most salespeople think of the 3 things that they're going to tell their potential customer, when it should be, what are the 3 things that you're going to ask them, so that you're listening to what they're saying. So in the sense of what are the talking points or magic words? It's more, for me, it's more an issue of what questions are you going to ask and what stories are you going to tell, as opposed, not tell, but share, because most people don't want to hear talking points.
Well, and what these, Karen, go ahead.
I agree with you. And instead of talking point, like framing points, maybe.
Yes.
Like
Actually, if you go to our website, there's, and we'll have a link, Lisa will put a link in there. There's a download of a George Lakoff book called Thinking Points. We got permission some years ago to be able to let people download that for nothing in PDF form. So check that out. But Thinking Points, he covers that a little more. He also does it in a book called The Little Blue Book, which is pretty good on that same thing. And I was going to ask, what Democratic Party are you working with?
Colorado.
Colorado, great. Yeah, your vice chair from a couple of years ago, he may still be there, was very much into framing. We met him at an ASDC meeting a couple of years ago. So if you can, oh gosh, I forget what his name was.
I can't remember his name either.
I can find it and send it to you. So I'll do that, but might be an idea to connect because we gave a presentation on this in Santa Fe and he came up afterwards. He goes, we've been doing some of this in Colorado. So that's good. But this whole thing actually came about, the thing that we do came about because I was a chair of our congressional district here in one of the congressional districts in Minnesota. And I watch as people came into one of our offices and they'd be volunteering and we'd hand them this crappy script. Everybody throws the scripts out. I mean, they're not really good at messaging. And so, I'm thinking, how in the world is this effective? And two thoughts were, one is Democrats are tactical. We do what we need to do right now in this election cycle with these candidates and these voters, period. That's what we do. Conservatives are strategic. They've invested billions and literally billions of dollars into framing and messaging. They created think tanks. They sent kids to college, put them in the think tanks, made them available to the news media as experts on whatever subject you wanted to pick. And the think tanks had the innocuous name so that the media didn't seem to understand they were always calling on conservatives. We have to be more strategic. And part of that strategy is we need to know how this works, how people think, and how we do it. We've grounded in values. The other part of our stop, drop, and roll is when we get to the roll part. What we talk about is understand what a liberal is and what we believe and what values we have. And if you're making messages that point to those values or that illuminate those values, now you can have a values conversation. If you're a volunteer the first time and you can at least try to make a message to a list of values, which we do have, it's easier. It also puts the voter at ease. You're not, the voter sees you coming up the driveway going, here's a political person. They know more than I do about politics. I'm going to look stupid, which is exactly what you're thinking if you're a volunteer, because you don't know everything either. So this way you start a values conversation, everybody can have a values conversation. And if you tell us, like Hobie says, if you tell or relate a story, share a story, then people, that includes people in the story. And so if you're talking about real people in real situations, everybody can relate to that, can have a conversation about it. So that is a really excellent question, Karen. I'm glad you brought that up. I'd also mentioned, I'm sorry, just one quick closing thing on System 2 is really getting System 2 right and being able to analyze is, if you think about scientists, it takes quite a bit of training to really understand reason and how it works and how the many ways we can be fooled. So I'm not saying all of this is easy, but I'm saying it's worth looking at and being aware of. And I'm sorry, Carrie, you were going to say?
I was just going to say that this is really encouraging, System 1 and System 2, in terms of, I was thinking of canvassing too, and just getting out there and doing the work, the value-based conversation. It's not about being perfect, and it's a long, long game. And it's just getting out there, talking to people and seeing somebody that has a different perspective than, say, your Republican neighborhood that you're walking in, that they even see you knocking on the door and presenting, because that's going to work those neural networks, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not a, all is lost if I don't have the right catchphrase or if I say it wrong. They're like, hey, a liberal's at my door, a Democrat. Look at that. Here's another one. Here's another one, right? So.
Well, and yeah, and that's exactly right. And you mentioned that it's a long game, and it is a long game. But don't be too discouraged. A woman who helped me start the whole Stop, Drop, and Get Connections Lab going, the co-founder, Julie Ethan, she was a hard right religious conservative, and a friend of hers, they were talking about immigration. That's where the immigration story about frames come from in the workshop. But it took her a few years to come around. But the thing she said is that when her friends said, I think of them as refugees, she never thought about it that way. And I've found the same thing. And people have told me that, have gone to the seminars, that when they put the issue in a different frame, a different perspective, a different point of view, for a lot of the conservatives and a lot of people who bought into the conservative stuff, even slightly, they've just never really thought of any of these things another way. And you could plant a seed in their head that could bloom when you're not around. So don't get too discouraged. If you're doing these things and you're talking about our values and you're talking to voters person to person about people things and about why you care about what's morally right and wrong, have that conversation. You may have nudged him an inch. Maybe the next person, maybe Carrie comes by next and finishes him off.
Hey, George, can I ask you a question?
Please.
And this would be Lisa, Carrie, Hobie, maybe you'll have. So let's say you're a campaign, you're a campaign ground organizer. You've got 10 of the same exact volunteers. You've got them for 20 nights. The weather's always good. It's canvassing season for your campaign. You get to spend as many days as you want working with them and training them. And then as many days as you want, they're out there canvassing, or has to add up to 20. So you could train them for 19 days and have them go out there and kick ass for one day, or train them for one day and have them go out and be just themselves and they're not experienced for 19 days. What do you do?
This is a great question. It actually is was kind of at the heart of what we started doing. Because when I saw those volunteers going out, I'm going, what could I give them that works? And, I don't know that there is a perfect answer for the person who's just coming in. If we've gotten to the office where we're handing out walk sheets, we didn't start training soon enough. But if that's where you are, then one thing that we have is a list of values, and I don't know if I got it right here or not. I don't. We have that on the website. We can also get that to you, but they're just a list of sample liberal values, and get people talking about things too. One thing they can talk about when talking about government is they can talk about two frames: protection and empowerment. So that helps a lot. The government is there to protect people, of course, but also we forget that it's also there to build roads, and the FAA and the Department of Justice and other things that serve not only people, but corporations and our well-being. So the empowerment part of that is good. So that's a way to think about it. Not everybody who you're going to hand this list to going out on walk sheet day to go door knocking is going to catch this, but it's something that if your groups are passing around enough and people are thinking about, they're getting in touch with who a liberal is and why. I think a lot of liberals would be hard pressed to tell you what a liberal is and what we stand for. And that's
I'm actually asking you, and as I think about this is not an ask, this is an offer. I will give you somewhere between 5 and 30 volunteers. I don't know the number.
Right.
Next year for 30 days, and you can do whatever you want in the western suburbs, in the districts where there are currently Republican senators.
All right, it's a deal. So what I'll do is
you can have 2 weeks of training, 1 week of training, whatever you want.
We would start with a day of training.
Okay.
Maybe spread that out over 2 half days so people aren't too burnt out. And then we'll give them the real basics of what's going on and let them see what's happening. Because it's a compressed time frame, there's only going to be so much we think people are going to really internalize it, but that's all you're giving us, so that's what we do. Then from there, we turn them loose and then have them come back. And then with maybe a week later, say, how did it go? Were you finding that this was working? Are you able to tell stories? Are you able to talk about values? If not, what can we do to help you get to values? And then when we get to the last day, which let's say the day before the election, and that's when half the people show up who never show up to go, oh, I guess I better go door knock. So we hand them the card and go, well, we'd sure like to spend more time teaching you this, but for right now, get out there, and it's get out the vote anyway. But if you have a conversation, try to do it from talking about what's right and wrong and your values. Here's a list of values. And I'm not going to expect much is going to happen at that point. But we've started them for the next election cycle so that we're going to get them on the first day or the 2 half days of training to begin with some follow-ups. That's how I would do it. I'm a firm believer that what we're doing right now here in the quote off year is exactly what we should be doing. And we're not the only ones doing it. Hobie does this with environmental groups and others. He's quite an expert at it. Greg, I know you are a great communicator in this area too. There also are folks that we know. Some of you attended the webinar we had with Antonia Scatton, who worked with George Lakoff. Antonia is absolutely brilliant on this stuff. She's my go-to person. And there are others. We formed a framing association, which we are, it kind of in its nascent stage, but it's getting to know other people who are doing this. And so this is catching on. I think that's good news. We're Tom, and I'll just point out we're at 8 o'clock. And so we can keep going here, but go ahead.
Just a real quick thing. What do you think? You think there's any value in doing any canvassing right now, since there is an election going on? We could get out there and just do some deep canvassing and trying to figure out what the issues people are worried about.
I like the idea of deep canvassing. It's been around for a little while, and I think people who are doing it, if you want to do it, this is a great time. If you can get your group to do it, I'm sure every state, Colorado, New York, wherever you're at, has the same problem we have. Our precincts are a mess or non-existent. Precinct organizing is very difficult, unless you're in Chicago, of course, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, especially since we're in the process of redrawing district lines now in the next year. But even if that's the case, you're still building some bank. You're putting something in the bank for the future, hopefully, if that's the case. So I don't know. I just threw that out there as a possibility from the standpoint of doing some deep canvassing.
Absolutely. Deep canvassing, also consider you have other opportunities. As you start to internalize this stuff and feel more confident in it, if you're a member of a group, well, you don't have to necessarily identify yourself as a Democrat, but you can certainly frame an issue that's being talked about and talk about it from a value frame without ever mentioning the word Democrat. You can talk about things with your family if you dare, with your extended friends. Let people know you're active. There are a lot of people who don't like to say who they are, but if they're closet Democrats and they know who you are, they may want to hitch up with you and talk about things. I'm absolutely astounded at the number of times the local community newspaper comes around in my neighborhood without any letters to the editor in it. And the only reason they're not in there is because no one wrote any that week. So you could be doing that. Social media is a great place to go on there, and rather than getting the slap into the troll, just instead saying, here's how I look at it, or here's another way to think about it, and just go off on another perspective. And it's very gratifying and satisfying to nail the trolls. I do it myself, but going out there and trying this in those areas, social media is a great way to do it. If you're doing it, and all the other people who've been on these webinars and attending trainings from us and from other people. The more of us there are, the more people are going to hear this stuff. The more they hear it, the more they're going to repeat it, and the more it becomes part of our culture as Democrats. That's what we need to do, is build this into our culture. And it's somebody is doing it in the Biden administration, and certainly Rep. Maloney was working at it.
Did you want it, were you going to do the value sandwich? I mean, it's 8 o'clock right now. We know some people might have to get off, but were you going to do your value sandwich?
We could do, you want to talk sandwiches? People have time. If you got to leave, go ahead. I don't want to, if you have to leave, we can, this is recorded, you can come back. Okay. Let's talk about sandwiches. The original truth sandwich, which, and I'll make this a little shorter. This is from Lakoff, and he says, you start with the truth. The first frame gets the advantage. The first person to frame gets the advantage. You set the conversation. In the middle, your burger is indicate the lie and avoid amplifying your opponent's language if possible. And number 3, return to the truth. Always repeat truths more than lies. So basically what Lakoff's saying here is make your point. If you have to indicate the lie, indicate what it is. Don't spend a lot of time on it. Go back to your point and your truth. Someone else mentioned, a guy named Roy Peter Clark mentioned, I like this, that the truth sandwich actually is different because the truth isn't inside the sandwich. Truth is on the outside. Baloney's in the middle. I kind of like that one. And in a rhetorical sense, we can refer to this as emphatic word order. I got this out of a writing thing. Order words for emphasis. Place emphatic words in a sentence at the beginning and the end. So there's a writing sandwich about emphatic words. And another quick one, an emotion sandwich. This is from Drew Weston. That's what he calls it, an emotion sandwich. He quotes David Hume, whose famous quote, reason is slave to emotion. And Weston says, Democrats have an irrational emotional commitment to rationality. We love to talk about facts and figures and policy, costs and benefits, and appeals to intellect and expertise. If you think about voters as calculating machines who add up the utility of your positions on the issues, you will invariably find yourself scouring the polls for your principles. And so, basically, as soon as voters perceive you turning to opinion polls instead of your own internal poll, which is your emotions, and particularly your moral emotions, they will see you as weak, waffling, pandering, and unprincipled, and they will be right, says Weston. So in short, voters want to know why you feel the way you do. The answer is not, for example, because 97% of scientists agree. Okay, they want to know why you care. They want to know what you believe is right and wrong. If you can talk about right and wrong, if I had to tell a volunteer one thing, if they knew nothing else, talk about what you feel is right and what you feel is wrong. Put it in those contexts. And Drew Weston goes on to say, under the right circumstances, even voters without much interest in politics will think about what they've heard, consider differences, and deliberate, if only long enough to draw an emotional conclusion. For example, I don't like this guy because he's making me think too much. So the right circumstances are always emotional. Behind every reasoned decision is a reason for deciding. We are not moved by leaders with whom we do not find an emotional resonance. We are not moved by policies if they don't touch on emotional implications for ourselves, our families, or things we hold dear, that we hold dear. So basically, the more rational the appeal, the less likely it is to activate the emotion circuits that regulate voting behavior. So Weston's emotion sandwich is, number one, let me see if I copy this in there too, so I'll get it up on the screen for you. Sorry, I'm going to use WordPad because it's a simple thing. Here we go. Make that big. Maybe a little smaller, sorry. There we go. Share the screen. Here we go. Lead with something emotionally compelling, a moral issue, a story about real people, an injustice that cries out to be rectified. In the middle, draw a contrast between you and your opposition, creating emotional resonance with you and dissonance with your opposition's position. And number 3, conclude the argument with a return to emotion. So yet another sandwich, which I think is an interesting, just occurred to me. There are all sorts of helpful sandwiches around there. And then I would like to, there's another one, a value sandwich, which I appropriated from Hobie. And since he's here, I will ask him to explain his value sandwich.
Did you want to pop it up here? Or
And I can
do you have it handy?
I do. I'll pop one up. It's probably too small.
Why don't you hold before you blow it up here?
Okay.
Because I think people will get stuck reading it.
Okay.
Which
Then
is fine. At some point we can send it out. So I'd like something that George says. He says that the frame doesn't stand by itself. It needs support around it. It needs a story. It needs other things. And I don't know if anybody George has mentioned this organization called the Voting Rights Lab, which is supported by Anat Shankar Osario and Lakeland Research and a number of other organizations. If you aren't a member of that and you're interested in politics, you should. Well, I got a lot out of it, and
they do a lot of the replace embrace chart.
Yeah, they do that, Karen. That would be great.
Yeah.
But they have a mechanism, and they've tested this mechanism, and there are 6 steps in the mechanism. 6 steps. See, I can't count. So I wanted to bring it down at least to 4, and you could probably bring it down to 3. But I like the metaphor of a sandwich because you've got 2 pieces of bread, and they begin with core values. Acknowledging the core values that we have. They're particularly focused on what they call the race-class narrative, which is an answer to the dog whistles of the Trump administration and the far right. And what the principles behind the race-class narrative is to counter the racial fear, the economic resentment, and the disgust with government with cross-racial solidarity, shared prosperity and racial justice, and then, good government for all. And the sandwich that Shankar Osario came up with, or I've tried to simplify, starts with your values and an appeal to that cross-racial solidarity. So it's a little bit of a story. It's not a frame. And it starts something like this. We can pick a value or an issue. Regardless of the color of our skin, where we come from, or where we live, we all want to be able to breathe clean air, drink pure water, and have a healthy future for our kids. So what we're saying there is it doesn't matter what color we are, where we come from, but the value there is the value of life and being able to thrive in our environment. Now, I do work in the climate area and environmental area, so you can understand that. So that's just kind of an opening statement. It's pretty hard to disagree with that, but when you include, regardless of the color of his skin, all of us, you're making an appeal to an identity and tying it to that core value. Then it is a little bit like one of George's sandwiches, or maybe it's the emotional sandwich or the truth sandwich, which is to call out the violation of that value or the lie, perhaps. And there's a psychological technique called inoculation, that if you identify why somebody is doing something, you will bring them in or inoculate them against being susceptible to that lie or that violation of the value. So in the situation I just mentioned, I might say, but there are CEOs from oil pipeline companies who just want to add another swimming pool to their estates and don't care about the air that we breathe or the future that we have for our kids. Okay, so now I've identified who they are. I've made it specific to people, to a particular person, and I might even use the company name at some point. But then the next part of the sandwich, that's a little bit of the mustard on the sandwich, got a little spice to it, okay? So now I want to go to what's our vision, and this is the meat of the sandwich. And the meat of the sandwich in this case might be, but today we have energy that's free that we can use from the sun, that's clean and renewable and can be used by everyone. I'm again making it up. I'm saying renewable energy is a counter to the pollution of the fossil fuel companies. And then what I want to do is return to the core value. Now is the time that we can all come together, again, appeal to coming together to build a better tomorrow by endorsing, again, I'm making it up, endorsing the America's Infrastructure Plan. We'd like you to join us and do X, Y, and Z, which is the call to action there. So it's values on the outside, identifying the violation of that value, and then finally making sure you're stating a positive vision. Nowhere in there are we telling people about the facts and that sort of thing. And the nice thing about this formula for me is that it allows, we're not dealing with particular issues. When we go survey and poll people, we're asking, well, what do you think about gun control? What do you think about police brutality? What do you think about this? It's issues based. And I'm older than dirt, and I really don't have time. I can't play whack-a-mole with all these issues. What I hope we can do as a party is ignite the values that we all share, at least in the persuadables in the middle. And by doing that, you find, for instance, like the Black Lives Matter movement has done this with I Can't Breathe. They've based it on the human breath. There's nothing more essential to life than the human breath. And by appealing to that value, they now also have not only a platform to combat police violence, they've got a platform by which to challenge mass incarceration or other issues that address that. And so, sorry, are you waving or somebody's going, okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking too much. So that's the value sandwich. Start with the values, make sure that it's cross-racial solidarity, identify the value, a violation of the value, put your vision out, end with the value and a call to action. So.
Thanks, Obi. That's great. Yeah, it's just interesting stuff. We've got more interesting stuff. We'll do another Beyond the Basics again. I think there's so many other places to go and things to visit in the science and the psychology behind this and in good examples. And so we'll be working a lot more of those in. This is the first time, I think there are a couple of people who may, a couple of three people may be the first time or may not have done one of our longer workshops. But we go more in, we basically take Lakoff's principles and have worked them into a 3-hour workshop. Lakoff was kind enough to advise us when we were doing that and has blessed us with that. And we went out to his house to hang for a while and go over it. So he's a very nice guy. And so our 3-hour workshop really gives you a good grounding in what that is. And I don't know that you need it for these sessions, but I think it helps. It really gets you going. So we'll do another one at some point. We generally do them for groups, but I've asked the groups we have if they mind if other folks come, because we do have people who want to do that. And that's what's happening. So that's where we're at. We'll get a link for the recording out to you guys.
I'm getting my links put together. We've got a lot of links I think that I'll be sending out probably on Wednesday. So we'll get the recording. Somebody's asked for the videos that George showed, so we'll get those out. And just various other things, the 4-way test, the replace and brace charts, thinking points, list of sample liberal values, and a value sandwich example that Hobie has. So we'll get those out to everybody.
And go poke around on our website. There's all sorts of stuff there. There's a lot about framing, but we also, just because most of my background is in, at least in politics, is in organizing. And so there's a lot of things in there for basic, like, for example, we were talking about brand new people who come in, who don't have much training. We not only want to train them how to talk to people, we want to keep them around and have them join our community so they'll come back next year. So there are some things in there for brand new volunteers, like, what am I doing here? Who are these people? You know, and it explains a lot about what's happening, what may be expected from them. There are some things for candidates there about knowing your win number, how to think about running for office. Are you running for the right office? I mean, you know, how running for the right office came about because somebody showed up on the day of our congressional district convention saying, I'm running for Congress and you should endorse me. And we're looking, all the delegates had already been snapped up by the two other candidates, and they were neck and neck. I mean, it was absolute 50-50. And we just go, who are you? You know, maybe you shouldn't wake up in the morning and go, gee, I think I'll run for Congress. So there's some of that. And
Every day.
you've seen it too, Karen? Yeah.
Every day I get some very weird person thinking they can run for congressional office. I'm like, can you start with school board?
Well, how about Lauren Boebert?
Exactly.
You brought her up, but how about Lauren Boebert?
Yeah, good question.
It was Republican.
It was, I guess that was successful for her for some reason. Must be the district that she's in.
I heard The Rock is going to run for president.
I
Yeah.
heard that too.
I'm so done with that. I'm so done with people who are famous for like one thing, thinking they can be president.
Yeah. Well, I think we are, I hope we've all learned a lesson that business people are not the best people to be president. They're not always the people who are the very best. So anyway.
Or mobsters also. Mobsters make bad presidents.
Yeah.
Mobsters are not good. Godfathers, all that. So thank you everybody for coming. We hope to see you again at the next one is
It's on, using stories in your
Telling about-
communication.
so we got all sorts of information on stories, stuff that also we can we'll have made available in written form that you, if you wanted to go out and do a little deal with a local group, feel free to use it and go do your own little seminar yourself. So that's it. And thanks all of you. connectionslab.org